Yeah, peace and greetings to the East family. This is Our Light Network, and I'm your main host, Majesty Montanez. So we're gonna continue on here doing another episode on a live stream. Our next episode after this, which is going to be live stream also, is going to be a rebuttal of N rather, an episode that was published by brother Ben X. I like brother Ben X. You feel me? He's a member of the Nation of Islam. He's a fruit of Islam. So in the next episode, which I'm gonna do before I go to sleep, I'm gonna I'm gonna go live again. He did a rebuttal episode with another Nation of Islam member trying to rebut the episode that we did here on this channel dealing with contradictions in the supreme wisdom lessons of the Nation of Islam. So I'm going to go live again. After I go live here on this particular episode, I'm going to go live again to talk about that particular episode, right? So anyway, so this particular episode right here is going to be dealing with the mystery of time and Masonic teachings, the mystery of time, how Freemasonry deals with time and what time really is and how important time is. So I'm going to shoot this episode and I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible. So in Freemasonry, the mystery of time and the beginning of initiation into Freemasonry starts off in the chamber of reflection. And in the chamber of reflection, the mystery of time is alluded to with the hourglass that is on the table, where you sit down in front of a table and you start to write out your philosophical will. Your will in which you express your desire to undergo the path of initiation in which you will die spiritually. So that's where the mystery of time begins.
Take them out. You should tell like in a week. Take care of them.
So that's where the mystery of time begins in Freemasonry in the chamber of reflection. Then next, in the first degree of Freemasonry, you have the 24-inch ruler, which is one of the three working tools of an entered apprentice Freemason. You have the 24-inch ruler, you have the chisel, and you have the mallet. And in some Masonic jurisdictions, you have just the 24-inch ruler and the common gavel. That's cool too, but pay attention to the mystery of time. That's what you need to pay attention to. So in Freemasonry, you have the mystery of time highlighted by that symbol that I mentioned to you earlier on, the hourglass, and also the 24-inch ruler or the 24-inch gauge. And it's alluded to in many other customs and symbols of Freemasonry. But let me just point those out and get into them, and then we'll be able to wrap up this episode, the importance of the mystery of time. So obviously, when you're dealing with the hourglass, you'll see that symbol, and it's pretty obvious that it's a symbol of time because sands are running down in the symbol, and that tells you that your time is limited on this earth. And that directs your mind to really focus upon what your life means on this planet. Like, what does life mean? Because I'm being shown the finite nature of time. I'm here for a reason. What am I going to do with my limited time? My time is going to run out. So that's where the hourglass comes in. Now with the 24-inch ruler or the 24-inch gauge, you were taught exoterically that the 24-inch ruler consists of 24 inches and that it's meant to teach you, first off, you're taught that the 24 inches of the 24-inch gauge or the 24-inch ruler are emblematic of the 24 hours in a day. A day consists of 24 hours. So you're taught that the 24 inches of the 24-inch ruler correspond to the 24 hours in a day, and that as Freemasons, we divide our day of 24 hours into 3 equal parts. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for good works, and 8 hours for the beauty of refreshment and sleep. So that gives us 3 eighths, 888, a period of 24 hours divided into 3 equal parts, equaling 8 hours each. And that's significant. And if you want to know what that symbolizes, just go back to our episode that deals with the symbolic meaning of the working tools of an entered apprentice Mason, right? So the point I'm making is that here we have a reference to time in the 24-inch ruler because we're taught how to balance our time, how to balance the 24 hours in our day into 3 equal parts, right? And what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to read to you a passage in this particular book, which my Grand Lodge uses. We used to give the book out for free once upon a time, but you can still purchase the book. It's a good book. It's called The Complete Illustrated Book of Yoga by Swami Vishnu Devananda, right? And this is how the book looks, right? The Complete Illustrated Book of Yoga. So in here he talks about the mystery of time. And I'm mentioning this because Freemasonry in all 3 degrees directs our mind to the mystery of time. So I'm just going to read what he says here. And then after I sign off, I'm going to get on in the next episode and I'm going to address what, Ben X on his channel said about me, dealing with what I said about the Nation of Islam lessons. And I'm going to address that directly. But anyway, the brother who wrote this book, Swami Vishnu Devananda, right? Peace, KMA. In regards to the mystery of time, he says this. He says, the more we analyze time and space, the more it vanishes as nothing but an idea. Time is the motion of the mind. Pay attention to that because, again, as I stated, one of the main working tools of an entered apprentice Mason and Freemasonry, the 24-inch ruler, is a symbol of time. We are taught that. There are several other symbols and customs in Freemasonry that refer to the mystery of time. So he says, time is the motion of the mind. That's deep because the 24-inch ruler in Freemasonry is a symbol of the mind itself. It is a tool of measurement. Your mind is a tool of measurement. So let's continue quoting what the brother says here. Time is the motion of the mind. Mind can think only in terms of before, now, and after. So that's a trinity. Before, now, and after. That's past, present, future. Mind can think only in terms of before, now, and after, or past, present, and future. According to yoga philosophy, reality is beyond time and space. That means anything we perceive, think, or know is due to the association with the mind. And mind can perform its function only in terms of space and time. Just as an artist can draw his pictures only on canvas or a similar background. Without a background, a picture cannot be drawn. So also, without the help of time and space, mind cannot think. The moment you try to still the mind, time and space vanish and come back when the mind starts moving. Therefore, in fact, the mind, time, and space are one and the same. Mind cannot exist independent of time, nor can space and time exist independent of mind. Mind, time, and space are like the 3 points of a triangle. He said, mind, time, and space are like the 3 points of a triangle. And keep that in mind when you're referring to the 24-inch ruler in the first degree of Freemasonry. It's a ruler, a symbol divided into 3 equal parts. That will give you an equilateral triangle. But anyway, let's continue on. Whatever we perceive in terms of space and time changes and brings different kinds of experiences according to the nature of the mind of the perceiver. Therefore, reality or God, the substratum behind everything, cannot be known in terms of space and time, for there is no change in God. How then can reality or God be known? The answer is that we must transcend the limitation of time and space. That is, we must transcend the mind or still the motion of the mind. When the mind is still, there is no idea of time and space, which means there is no external consciousness except an awareness of self where there is no change. This awareness of self is called self-realization or God realization, which is possible only when we transcend the mind, time, and space. This awareness of self or God is known as attainment of immortality. Therefore, mortality means externalization of the self, which becomes mind, space, and time. The self as pure consciousness is the reality that is continuous, constant, and never changing. But in order to make possible the perception of the self, we must split it into separate moments. Imagine it as an infinite series of separate moments out of which there exists for us only one. In other words, when reality is perceived, we call it present. What we did not see and do not see, we call the past. What we do not quite see at the present moment but are expecting, we call the future. Therefore, time, past, and future is based on the reality I, which Hindu philosophy describes as the eternal now or eternal existence. Now, let us analyze our relation to the past, present, and future. Strictly speaking, neither the past, nor the present, nor the future exists for us. And yet, we are continuously living on this reality of the present that vanishes before it appears into past, rushing the future into present, only to disappear into past continuously. Pay attention to what this brother's saying right here, and I'm going to continue reading from this part of his book. Stop here and reflect a moment, and you will agree with the Hindu philosophy of non-existence of the world existing only in some phantasmagoria of illusions, flashing and disappearing in the mind. We consider the past does not exist as it has passed, disappeared, changed itself into something else. The future also does not exist because it does not exist at this moment. It has not yet arrived. Now, what is the present? The present is that which does not exist because it has no measurement. The present is that which does not exist because it has no measurement. The present is that interval of time or moment of time when the future changes into the past. This moment of transition of a phenomenon from one non-existence, future, into another non-existence, past, is the present, which is only a fiction, as the present moment has no measurement. This present moment can never be caught and measured, and what we did catch is always the past. So we have to admit here that neither the present, nor the past, nor the future exists. Therefore, the past is that which has disappeared, leaving an impression. The present has no existence because that unimaginable time of present moment flashes through the mind. Before we catch it into the past, ending nowhere in an endless, vicious circle of nothing. Usually, we take no account of this and are constantly fooled by our imaginary reality of the world created by mind. In conclusion, time and space are other aspects of mind. And this gets deeper, and I'm going to keep reading, and then I'm going to sign off because this is so deep. If you want to see what the brother's talking about here in regards to the mystery of time, the book is here, right? You could order this book. It's cheap. In my Grand Lodge, we used to give it out for free to everybody. But the brother, again, the book is the complete illustrated book of yoga. And this section I'm reading is dealing with the mystery of time. And what I'm telling you on this episode here is that Freemasonry brings to your attention the mystery of time. And Freemasonry does that through the hourglass, through the 24-inch ruler or the 24-inch gauge of the first degree, and through other customs and rituals in Freemasonry, right? So let me just continue with what the brother said. If you find it interesting, you do. If you don't, you don't, right? But I think he makes sense overall. So he says, conceptions of time differ according to the development of the mind. Animals have their own conception of time, which is absolutely different from our conception, meaning human beings. Though animals and birds do not keep a calendar, to find out when to migrate before the approaching winter, or when to hibernate, and other such things, they know instinctively all these functions necessary for their existence. Therefore, the animals and birds' conception of time is to perform one action after another as nature prompts them to do. These natural actions of animals in different seasons and time are guided by the instinctive mind. Here he's talking about the subconscious mind, Pisha. Without it, there is no time or season for them. So if you've been following what I've been saying, the brother who wrote this book, Swami Vishnu Devananda, what he's basically telling you is that, what he's basically telling you is that the mystery of time is that time is only the motion of consciousness. It's the motion of the mind itself. And that past, present, and future are ultimately non-permanent. They are, from an ultimate overall perspective, illusions of the mind. It doesn't mean that they're not real for the time and place being, but ultimately speaking, they're non-permanent, right? So let me just keep reading what he's saying. I just mentioned that so that you could probably get a better grasp of what the brother is saying. So he says, in relation to the mystery of time and how it relates to the mystery of the mind itself, he says, it must be remembered here that the lifespans of many animals and birds are much shorter than man. Yet, for an animal or a bird, the short lifespan will appear as long as ours. Therefore, if the lifespan of a monkey is 20 years, those 20 years will appear to a monkey as 100 years appear to us. Within the 20 years of life of a monkey, it will be able to perform all the natural functions from birth to death, etc., which take 100 years for a man to do. For the mind of the monkey, 20 years may appear as 100 years, because mind can create an illusion of making 100 years into 15 and 15 years into 100. Even in our daily life, such phenomena occur, though we do not give them much attention. Let us take the condition of a husband who is waiting at the airport for the arrival of his wife, who has been away for a long time. Pay attention to this if you're serious about knowledge. This is deep. Okay, he says, now let us suppose the plane is an hour late. His mind will create such a condition that each moment will appear as ours. Now, let us take the same man's condition after the arrival of his dear wife. His mind now starts functioning in reverse process because he is very happy to see his wife. And the time will pass so quickly that he may not even be aware that hours are passing. So if you're following everything that I'm quoting from the brother's book, he's talking about the relativity of time and how time is really based on the motion of the mind. It's really based on the motion of thought. That's what time really is. So let me continue with what he's stating before I sign off. So the brother goes on to say, at this happy hour, he receives a message that he must go to a distant place the very next day, leaving his wife for some business for a few months. Now, every hour will pass as a few moments as the time approaches to leave his wife. Therefore, when there is concentration of the mind, or mind is in a very happy mood, time appears to move quickly. But when there is agitation and distraction of the mind, owing to worries and anxieties, time appears to move slowly. And anybody, I'm swerving a little bit, but going on with what the brother's saying here. For anybody who has been in a distressing situation where it's boring, time appears to move slowly. What he's telling you is that the perception of time and time itself is really based on the motion of the mind. That's what he's telling you. That is the mystery of the mind. That mind is really the motion of thought. It is the motion of consciousness. And I'm relating this in this episode to Masonic symbols, when we're taught from the first degree that the 24-inch ruler, which is ultimately symbolic of the mind itself, is a symbol of time. We are taught in Freemasonry about the mystery of time, not just through the 24-inch ruler, but also through the hourglass in Freemasonry, also through the time or patience that it takes to move from degree to degree in Freemasonry. So time is everywhere displayed to us as a symbol in Freemasonry. So let me continue with what the brother's saying in this section. He says, again, in a dream, again, in a dream, a whole series of the events of 20 years will appear in 15 minutes. Yet, in those 15 minutes, time is equal to 20 years in the waking state. For the mind of the man, 15 minutes of dream time is a solid 20 years until he comes back to the waking state. Therefore, both waking time and dreaming time are true only in relative terms, and both are false time created by the mind, whether it is in a dream or awake. So again, here he's talking about the relativity of time. It is relative. It has no intrinsic reality to it. That's basically what he's stating. So let me continue on. He says, just as for our mind, the lifespan of the animal is very small, so also are there higher beings who live in higher mental planes who consider that our lifespan of 100 years is just a day for them. So here he's considering the fact that very much possibly there are beings of a higher nature than human beings, which would be called extraterrestrials. He's not necessarily saying that extraterrestrials exist, but he's telling you that when you study the nature of the mind, you have to consider the possibility that perhaps there are higher beings that are more evolved than humans, and that their mental faculties will perceive time different than we perceive it on face value, basically. All right, so he continues and says, to illustrate the difference of time in different levels, there is an old story in one of the holy scriptures, the Srimad Bhagavata. And then he goes into a certain scripture dealing with the ancient Hindu religion, right? That illustrates the relativity of time. And again, you could buy the book if you want to read it. But let me continue on what he says after that. He says, you may consider this only a story, yet ancient Hindus explain in this story one of the great truths of time. a truth that is very near to Dr. Einstein's theory of the relativity of time and space. So here he's talking about Einstein's theory of relativity. He says, Einstein explained time as a fourth dimension in his special theory of relativity. In his theory, he discarded the idea of absolute time, of a steady, unvarying, inexorable, universal flow of time streaming from the infinite past to the infinite future. He explained that the sense of time is a form of perception, like the color sense. What we call a year is only a measure of Earth's progress in its orbit around the sun. But for an inhabitant of Mercury, and he's speaking theoretically here, but for an inhabitant of Mercury, a year and a day amount to the same thing, because Mercury makes its trip around the sun in 88 of our days. In other words, a day in Mercury time, or the time that it takes for Mercury, the planet Mercury, to revolve around the sun, is 88 days of our Earth days. Pay attention to that. He's talking about the relativity of time. So, all right, a year and a day amount to the same thing because Mercury makes its trip around the sun in 88 of our days. And in that period, rotates just once on its axis. But now we are aware that all our terrestrial ideas of time are meaningless when we soar beyond the neighborhood of the sun. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, there is no such thing as a fixed interval of time independent of the system to which it is referred, and there is no such thing as now, independent of a system of reference. To translate his basic idea of the relativity of time and space, Einstein pointed out some hitherto unsuspected properties of clocks and rods. For example, a clock attached to a moving system slows down as the system's velocity increases, as compared to a stationary clock that runs without any motion, though both clocks are of the same make. Again, a measuring rod made of wood or metal or any other material attached to any moving system shrinks in the direction of its motion according to the velocity of the system. These peculiar changes of the slowing of the clock and the contraction of the rod have nothing to do with the construction of the clock or the composition of the rod, nor are they mechanical phenomena. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, an observer riding along with the clock and the rod would not notice these changes. On the other hand, a stationary observer watching a moving system would find that the greater the velocity, the greater the contraction, and the slower the movement of the clock. For example, a stationary observer will notice that a yardstick that moves at 90% of the velocity of light has shrunk half its length. And if the velocity of the yardstick is increased further until it attains the velocity of light, it would shrink away to nothing. Similarly, a clock attached to a moving system that moves with the velocity of light would stop completely. And let me digress a little bit here, but if you're familiar with the speed of light, in physics, the speed of light is approximately 186,000 miles per second. And according to physics, nothing in the physical world could travel faster than the speed of light in a vacuum. Nothing. Keep that in mind. Okay, I'm going to continue. Here, it must be remembered that the slowing down of a clock and contraction of the rod are not noticeable in an automobile or airplane, because these changes can be detected only when the velocity of the moving system approaches very near to the velocity of light. Another important point to be noted is that the contraction of the rod and the slowing down of the clock are entirely relative with respect to the two systems moving with respect to each other. Thus, for example, an observer in a spaceship traveling at very high speed notices that another spaceship moving away from it has shrunk considerably, whereas he would see no shrinking of his own spaceship. Just as speed shortens length, so also speed slows time. These effects are not limited to such mechanical gadgets as clocks and watches. Even biologic, physical, chemical, and mental processes will slow down to the same degree if a person travels with a very high velocity. So here again, the brother's talking about time and space. That's what he's talking about. And this is a good example. And then I guess we'll sign off after this portion. But what he says here is pretty good in terms of time and space and the relativity of time, because it's a fact of science, what he says here. He says, let us see the conception of time of the crew in a spaceship that travels at very high speed, approaching the speed of light, compared to the time conception of people on Earth. Suppose it takes 10 light years to reach from the Earth a satellite of another solar system in a spaceship that could travel practically with the speed of light, and 10 light years back to the Earth. That makes 20 light years for the round trip. Naturally, we assume the crews in space should be provided with food for 20 years. But according to the law of relativity, this precaution of providing food for 20 years is absolutely unnecessary if the spaceship is able to travel with the speed approaching the velocity of light. And again, the velocity of light is 186,000 miles per second. While traveling at the speed of light, everything slows down in the spaceship, including the heartbeat, respiration, digestion, and the mental processes of the crew and the passengers. 20 years on Earth would be but a few hours to the people in the spaceship. Therefore, they would not need to be provided with food for 20 years. So if you have a hard time understanding what the brother is saying here, what he's calling your mind to is the relativity of time and how that relates to mind itself. So according to physics, the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second, approximately, which means that nothing physically could travel faster than the speed of light in a vacuum. So when something is approaching nearness to 186,000 miles per second, which is the speed of light, it must naturally slow down. It has to slow down because nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. And if you have a hard time like comprehending this, which is cool, study the lectures of Stephen Hawking, who was a great physicist. Rest in peace, he died. You know what I'm saying? But he was one of the greatest physicists in science in modern times. And he gives lectures on all of this. And he could break it down way better than I could break it down, or better than the brother is breaking it down here, who's an initiate of the ancient Hindu mysteries, right? But I'm gonna read the rest of what he said here, and hopefully, you know, it gives you some light and insight. So he says, suppose that in 1960, a passenger ship leaves Earth to go to a distant planet in another solar system. The trip takes 20 light years to go and 20 years to return. The spaceship will complete its journey and return to the earth in the year 2000. So you see here, he's giving you an analogy that, let's just say you had a ship, a spaceship that has passengers on the earth and it's leaving in the year 1960, and it takes 20 years to get to where it's going and 20 years to come back. In earth years, that's going to bring you to the year 2000. That's what he's saying. It's going to take 40 years in earth years for the trip, right? He says one of the crew is 20 years old when he leaves the earth. In 1960, which is the year given it in the analogy, in 1960, when he leaves a wife who is 20 years old and a child who is 1 year old. When he returns after a few hours from his trip at a tremendous velocity, he will get a big surprise if he had gone on a trip without considering the law of relativity, right? On arriving home, he will find that his wife, his child, his friends, his relatives have all grown 40 years older than himself. But the crewmen and everybody else in the spaceship aged only a few hours. He left at the age 20, and when he returns 40 years later, he is still 20 years old. So let me go back to the original analogy, right? In this original analogy, what he's trying to tell you is that he's traveling on a spaceship according to the velocity of light. That's what he's telling you. So time is relative. This man on this hypothetical spaceship is traveling on a vessel that moves so fast that it forces all of his internal bodily functions to slow down. So he's not going to age the same way somebody on earth is going to age. But when he returns, everybody on earth is going to be older than he is. It's just the law of physics. That's basically what the brother's explaining here. So he goes on to say, he says, now let us see the similarity between the story of the king who took his daughter to the creator to find a husband and the above illustrations of the law of relativity. So here he's referring you back to a story he told you about Hindu scriptures that I didn't recite here. But I'll keep reading. He says, when the king returned to earth, after a few minutes on the plane of the creator, he found a new age and a new civilization, just as the passengers of the spaceship found everybody on earth had aged 40 years while they had aged only a few hours, right? The king's method of transportation might be altogether different from our spaceship. A developed mind can move without the help of physical transportation. According to the special theory of relativity, the velocity of light is the top limiting velocity in the universe. And the velocity of light is 186,000 miles per second. I'm just throwing that in there. Nothing can ever move faster than light, no matter what forces are applied. In that case, human beings can never dream of reaching even the nearest star, which is several hundred light years distant. Our lifespan of a mere 100 years prevents even the possibility of undertaking such ventures. Yet in ancient Hindu scriptures are descriptions of man traveling to the moon, to the sun, and to the stars. The ancients knew a way of traveling the interstellar regions without the help of our so-called modern mechanical devices. Their spaceship was the mind. Their spaceship was the mind. Pay attention to what the brother's saying. Generally, we think that mind is used only for thinking. Though the limit of man's physical speed is the speed of light, Yet, with the help of the mind, he is able to travel anywhere in the physical universe and beyond the physical universe to the higher astral planes. Mind is not limited by velocity. It can reach a distant star in a moment, for time and space are creations of the mind. So the point that he's making, going back to the original thesis, is that time is merely the motion of the mind. That's what it is metaphysically. That's what he's telling you here. This is all he's really trying to express to you. Listen to what he said, what I read, and if you find a contradiction in what he said, point it out. I'm not saying he doesn't contradict himself nowhere here, but what I will agree with him in is that time is merely the motion of the mind. That's what it is. Time is the motion of the mind. Past, present, future. Those are all states of mind. The mind can travel as it pleases. It is not bound by the speed of light. That's what he's pretty much saying, and I agree with him there. So he continues to say, the ancient Hindus divided time according to the plane of consciousness in which mind functions. In a higher plane of consciousness, several thousand Earth years will appear as a few hours, because there the mind functions in a different velocity. In the lower planes of plants and minerals, mind functions in a very low degree of motion, making them appear to be living in a perpetual state of sleep without any conception of time. As man evolves, he will be able to operate his mind more and more in higher planes and to transcend his physical limitations. But yoga, which is the ancient mystery system of the ancient Hindu religion, the ancient mysteries of ancient India, yoga declares that the final liberation from the clutches of space and time is possible only when the mind itself is transcended. For the mind itself is the cause of space and time. So he says the mind itself is the cause of space and time, whether it is in the physical planes or the astral planes. In the final stage, when man realizes that nothing is outside and that everything is within himself, then he will be able to transcend the limitations of space and time. In yoga, this stage is known as self-realization or God realization, where there is no difference between the knower, knowledge, and the known. Knower, knowledge, and the known. And where the past and the future merge with the present, the eternal now of the Hindus. And if you're in an urban area and you've come across, I'm not reading what he said here. If you're in an urban area and you've come across brothers and sisters, for example, of the nation of gods and earths, who teach knowledge of self, but they have their own style of teaching. You'll see in the supreme alphabet of the nation of gods and earths, the letter N means now. And that breakdown is going to refer to what the brother said here, dealing with ancient Indian philosophy or the ancient Indian mysteries. He says, real knowledge is possible only when there is no past or future and when there is no time or space. So, anyway, the brother goes on. You know what I'm saying? He says a few other things that are pretty cool, you know what I'm saying, in relation to that, the mystery of time, how it relates to the mystery of the mind. But I mention that to you And you could, like I said, you could get the book. It's called The Complete Illustrated Book of Yoga. Pretty good book. It's decent. In my Grand Lodge, we used to give it away for free. The physical book, you would write us and we'll just send it to you for free. And maybe it's still being given out for free through different institutions or organizations. But you can still get the book if you want. I think it costs maybe like $7 or something like that if you were to buy it on Amazon or eBay or whatever. But anyway, the brother there, he breaks down the mystery of time and how time, essentially in the ancient mystery teachings, is really the motion of the mind itself, past, present, future. In order to truly understand what he's saying, you will have to not only study science, so if you're able to bring your mind to a state of stillness and meditation, you'll understand what he's talking about. Past, present, future, that's a trinity. And Freemasonry itself brings your attention to the mystery of time with the 24-inch ruler, with the hourglass, with the flying hourglass, with all of the symbols dealing with death, with the fact that there's a time to go from apprentice to fellow craft to master mason, and also that in every degree there's a time in which you have to wait with patience to ascend to the next higher degree. So anyway, and there are other symbols, I'm sure. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that. And with that, I'm going to get out of here. And then next, I'm going to do an episode addressing, maybe I'll look at some of the comments. I'm going to do an episode addressing Ben X and the Nation of Islam and what they had to say about my particular lecture dealing with contradictions in the Nation of Islam lessons. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to read some of the different comments, which they're not a lot. I see Malcolm Prophet, peace, brother. I see Travis Ripley, greetings and peace to the East, my brother. Reginald Humphrey, peace and greetings to the East. KMA Classics asks, could we pause time? Of course, the point is in this lecture is that time is really illusory in reality. So of course you could pause time, but it's not to say that you're going to pause time on the objective plane. You're going to pause time in your mind. Just study what time is. That's all. Go back through everything with our lecture. You got Inner G369. He says, I'm rich now, I'm God. Yes, you are. Everything is God. No doubt about that. All right, so you got Malcolm Prophet giving his comments. All right, so anyway, with that being said, I'm going to sign off. And then I'm going to do my episode dealing with Ben X and what the Nation of Islam had to say about, you would like for me to study Imhotep. I've studied Imhotep. Like, I don't think, Malcolm Prophet, that you really pay attention to my lectures. I have a lecture that's called The True Purpose of Freemasonry and the Freemasons. And I go into all of African history dealing with Freemasonry. And I wouldn't call Imhotep the father of Freemasonry. Go into my lectures. That's all. And I tell you where Freemasonry is found in ancient Egyptian philosophy, religion, and archaeology. So don't tell me I should study, bruh. No disrespect to you, but you haven't studied as long as I have at all. And I'm not dissing you or nothing like that, but you're not on my level of knowledge, my brother, at all. If you was on my level of knowledge, you wouldn't be having a church that you promoting on Facebook. You promoting a religion. Study, and I'm not dissing you. I'm not disrespecting you or nothing like that, but you have studied for go back to the lectures. I'm telling you, my brother, you need to study. You haven't studied as long as me, and I'm not being egotistical. I'm just telling you the facts. You have not studied as long as I have studied. And it sounds good when you're a commentator on YouTube. But anybody who has any type of challenge to what I say, come on Zoom. Come on a Zoom meeting with me. And that's when I start showing that individuals don't really have the knowledge that they say they have. We could go into Arabic, we could go into Hebrew, we could go into world history. And then I start pointing out shit. Like, you don't know the Hebrew language, you don't know the Greek language, none of that. You don't know it. So when I show it in an actual live upfront meeting, that's when dudes start falling back. Like, damn, this young brother really knows his shit. Because I don't pretend, bruh. I don't front. Whatever I'm telling you I know is what I know. You know what I'm saying? So you got to do your study. No disrespect to you, kid, but you got to do your study, bro. You young to me, and I'm not dissing you. Everybody starts off at some point studying. But to me, you particularly are young on the path. You're not nowhere near the level I'm on in terms of knowledge. Nah, I'm not saying that or nothing like that. I respect you, my brother. But never say that, oh, the brother needs to go study something. Nah, I've already done lectures on that. I've done lectures on Ptah-hotep, Imhotep, so on and so forth. Amenhotep, all of that. You got to do the studies, kid. That's it. You know what I'm saying? Transcend organized religion and realize that God is your true self. Because I'm not saying you particularly, bruh, but a lot of dudes do that. They'll come on my channel and be like, yeah, but you ain't shown and proved nothing. Not saying you, I'm saying in general. A lot of cats haven't shown and proved anything. And it sounds good when you're a commentator, but show me. Or show us, not just me, show us who is your student, who has learned under you. Who has learned under you, who is really adept in knowledge, who has learned under you. If you don't have proof of that and you can't come on and show any students or anything like that who have learned under you, which I can and I do, you can't tell me nothing. Can't tell me nothing. You know what I'm saying? And if you're not willing to demonstrate your knowledge on live, you're not showing me nothing either. And a lot of cats can't really do that. I'm the type of cat, and dudes know that. I'll pull a card. We'll pull out a Torah, and I'll ask you some simple shit. Yo, what's that letter right there in the Torah? I'll hold it up to the screen and ask you, yo, what's that letter? And you'll be there like, I don't know the letter off top. And everybody's gonna laugh at you like, you don't know the Hebrew, you fronting. And that's what a lot of these dudes do, man. And I'm not saying that's you, so-and-so or whatever. But anyway, with that, I'm gonna get out of here because I gotta get on the next episode and I gotta address, you know, Ben, and I'm gonna go point for point with what they said about my lecture, and I respect them brothers because they still gave me some respect, but I'm gonna pick that apart point for point. And with that, love, light, peace. I hope y'all enjoy your night. God bless.